Yo, what's going on, guys? It's G-Miners here, and in this video, I'm going over my personal favorite build slash setup for Sunbracers. I tend to not really like running Sunbracers in a lot of harder content, specifically because I don't like playing with heat rises. I think it's a slow mod slash slow aspect to use, but with this setup, we don't rely on heat rises at all. We get our nades back left and right. We have a ton of different healing methods, like cure through grenade kills and fire sprites on the ground for restoration. The ad clear, as you can see, is insane. And then on top of that, we have a ton of ability regen through the mods, like I said, and then also through some additional abilities. As you can see here, if I throw one grenade, I'm going to get my melee back like that, and that should ignite, and then I can get the rest of my melee or grenade abilities rolling like so. Get rid of the boss. Get Sunbracers to proc again, and then the ad clear, AoE, healing, just keeps going nuts. As you can see, none of my abilities are up, but I do have my melee back, which is what we're fully spec'd into. I can shoot this at the ground, cause it ignition, and then keep spamming nades for ad clear, damage on the boss, everything else. The nades last a super long time too. As you saw, I didn't even re-proc Sunbracers there, and it just killed the boss, it killed everything else, it kept me alive. I failed to proc it that final time, and still, we beat this level, so super strong build, great survivability, one of the best ad clear options in the entire game, and the damage is extremely good too. Bosses like Regen are also able to be sold when using Sunbracers, especially if they have larger hitboxes. I think Templar is another one, and there's probably a few others in the game as well. Just by throwing the nades up in a spot like this and having things rain down on Regen, you're going to see that we get a ton of extra damage. Applying a 30% debuff helps as well. I obviously won't one phase or kill her here. You can do it if you optimize it a lot further. Here we hit like 790,000, almost 800,000 damage just by ourselves. So this makes one phasing bosses a lot easier too if you have a few players doing this, again, with bosses where this works. Before I go over the full subclass layout, if you guys aren't already, make sure to drop a like and sub down below. That helps the channel out a ton. And that said, super-wise, we're going to be on Well of Radiance. Again, this is for movement, boss phases, ad clear phases. This is hands down the best super in the entire game. So whenever you're on solar, unless you're playing like PvP, there's no reason not to be running well. I chose Phoenix Dive mainly for the cure that it provides, and it's one of the fastest class abilities to actually get off. Plus, we can use it whenever we want, as long as we're in the air. And if you are on the ground, I still think it's faster than a Rift because you can just spam space, press it, and then activate it super quickly. Plus, with our mods, we're getting a ton of energy back through using our class ability. Incinerator Snap is then going to be the best melee to use to consistently get kills to proc Sunbracers. The damage sucks, and the tracking sucks even worse. However, it very easily ignites enemies, which deals a ton of damage. If you look over at the compendium right here, you're gonna see that 5 sparks explode and inflict 30 scorch stacks if we have Ember of Ashes. So just with 4 of these, procking on a single enemy, it will instantly ignite them and allow us to proc Sunbracers extremely easy, which is why you see me using this melee at enemies, aiming straight at the ground so that they explode very quickly, they don't track, and then they trigger an ignition. Aspect-wise, Icarus Dash does pretty much nothing for us other than give 2 fragment slots, and then it's also used just for movement. You do also get some cure when you get rapid airborne kills, but again, since we don't have heat rises, I'm not playing too much in the air with this setup. And then finally, we do have 2 more fragment slots through Touch of Flame. I honestly don't think this is needed, but it drastically increases the damage that you're dealing with the build. So unless you need heat rises on for something like a skip in a raid or a dungeon, as I mentioned, just run Touch of Flame. For our solar grenades, this is going to increase their duration, which is why you see them on the ground lasting a ton of time, and it emits lava blobs, which deal a ton of additional damage, which is why you saw things like Regen get absolutely chunked just by throwing like 10 to 15 grenades, watching those lava blobs rain down. Ember of Resolve is great, and it adds to our survivability. Now, anytime we get a solar grenade final blow, this isn't just specific to solar grenades, by the way, it works through any one of these, not just the solar grenade. This is going to cure us, which is a large chunk of health immediately back. So this increases our survivability. Along with this, we also have Ember of Mercy, which gives us restoration when picking up a fire sprite. And then to actually generate fire sprites, we have Ember of Searing, so that anytime we get a scorched target defeat, which will be through all of our abilities, especially our grenades and melee, we generate these so that we get that restoration to proc. And naturally, fire sprites are going to give grenade energy back as well. Lastly, for any single build that you're running, that you're doing on solar, that you have a goal of getting damage off against enemies, running Ember of Ashes is going to give a 50% increase to our scorch stacks, which makes Incinerator Snap much more likely to ignite enemies and increases the damage and ignitions that we're proccing with our solar grenades. Moving on to the mods we're running with the build, everything here is used for a very specific reason. Certain things you can definitely sub out. like Dynamo and Ashes to Assets in the helmet if you want heavy ammo finder and scout mods. Even Solar Siphon, since we don't always use a solar weapon as well. But for the mid game of this build, if you want it to function at its highest level, I would keep these mods on. But again, if you need to sub something out for something like Special Finisher, if you don't want double outreach, that works too if it's needed. That said, we're starting things off with Ashes to Assets. As we get Grenade Final Blows, this gives super energy. Multiple copies stacking is going to have diminishing returns, so I like to try and minimize the amount of copies I have if I can get other things on the build. I have Solar Siphon on by default to use solar weapons like a Callus mini tool, but I have been using Funnel Web a lot because we have Volatile Flow, so you can easily sub this out for something like Void Siphon as well, or as I mentioned, sub this out for any other mod. And then we also have Dynamo, so that whenever we use our Phoenix Dive near enemies, we get super ability back as well. If you somehow weren't aware already, we've been rocking Sunbracers as our exotic of choice with this build. Anytime we get a melee final blow, we get 5 seconds of infinite grenade regen, where you can throw 5 grenades during this period, just based on how much energy we get back over time. And then with this, we also get increased duration of our solar grenades, even further than what Touch of Flame provides as well. On these gauntlets, I have on firepower, so that grenade final blows, because we're getting a lot, generate orbs of power. I also have momentum transfer, so that dealing just grenade damage is going to slowly over time give us chunks of melee back. This should have a few second cooldown. And then lastly, I have on melee kickstart, which is going to give us up to, I think, 25 or 30% of our melee straight back when we use it, assuming that we have something like 3 armor charge stacks. On my chest piece, I just have stat boost mods and then also damage resistance mods. None of the other mods in this slot are typically worth it for most builds. Reserves are definitely worth it if you're in a damage phase or a boss fight, but you can easily swap to these, rally, and then unequip them. Moving on to my boots, this is how we get a ton of grenade energy back and then also keep our armor charge stacks high. First is going to be Invigoration, which gives us melee energy anytime we pick up an Orb of Power. And since we are on solar and we don't have something like Devour, for our healing, we are using Recuperation as well. This is very similar to Cure, but every time we pick up an Orb of Power, we're also just getting a chunk of health straight back too to help keep us alive. Lastly, to keep our armor charge stacks up, I have stacks on stacks. Now, anytime we pick up an orb or a fire sprite, instead of getting the base amount, which should be 1 or 2 armor charge stacks, we're going to be getting an additional one to jump this up to 2 or 3 stacks. Lastly, on my class item, there wasn't a ton, which in my opinion really helped and fit into the build. So I opted for double outreach. This is going to reduce melee cooldown whenever we use our class ability. This doesn't need to be near enemies, which is super nice if you just need your melee back and you don't want to worry about also proccing it like Dynamo. And then I do also have on distribution, which just reduces every cooldown across the board for a little bit less energy whenever we use our class ability near enemies themselves. Just in case you guys want a full recap, this is our entire solar subclass that we're using in 99% of content. So make sure that your build looks exactly like this. And then after that, this is our mod screen as well. These mods aren't super important. Something like Solar Surge and Volatile Flow might be important if you want those. And then right there are all the mods we're using on every single piece of armor. I want to do another quick piece of gameplay here just to show off how fast we can actually build our super. And once again, this is like minus 15 content. This is Neomuna, which is apparently harder than contest mode raids. But that being said, I did also forget to mention that I picked up a camera and I picked it up mainly for live streaming. Speaking of which, if you're not already, make sure to follow me over on my Twitch. But I figured I'd use it in more of these videos and try a different kind of like commentary style for build videos. So if you guys do like this format better than just voiceovers and the regular builds that I put out, make sure to let me know in the comments below. I think this build is extremely well put together, especially with the new mod system and losing access to a lot of other mods like melee kickstart and heavy-handed, how they used to work and give something like 50% of your melee back, but it still feels like it flows really well together. We get our nades back left and right, get healing for days. Our super is already halfway up, which is insane. And once again, the damage that we're dealing against like tankier enemies is wild as well. Just like that, I should be able to get my melee back, ignite these guys, spam nades again. And that's literally the entire gameplay loop. That is the entire build. I think this is the strongest current option that we have for Sunbracer's build, especially since I don't like running something like Heat Rises, and this is a perfect substitute just with mods and fragments that we're running. As I mentioned, I do stream a bunch over on Twitch, and there's even a role set up in my Discord server, which I'll have a link to in the description below as well, where you can get to see when I go live and get pings over there. Anyways, that's it for this video, guys. As always, have a good one. Peace.